It's time to talk about Kilim Beige, a soft, warm, comforting paint color by Sherwin-Williams. And not only are we doing that, I've prepared a very special color palette based around it. Some fun colors mixed in too, because we're starting neutral, we don't want to end neutral. A little bit of everything in this video, so buckle in and let's start this episode of Color Quickie on Kilim Beige. Now this color is part of the expert pick line of paint colors. I don't think it's an actual collection. I suppose these are just colors that were selected by Sherwin-Williams experts as the choices to go when it comes to paint colors. At least it's a great starting point. So let me start you off with the LRV of this color, because that is one of the most important things to be mindful of when you're looking at any color. And luckily Sherwin-Williams is one of those companies that does tell us how light or dark these colors are. Out of 100, 0 being dark black, 100 being white, Kilim Beige scores a 57 on the LRV scale, which means it reflects 57% of the light that hits it. In practical terms, this tells us that this is a slightly lighter leaning mid-tone color, which is pretty desirable for most projects, I think, at least on the walls. Colors that are in the mid-50s to mid-60s, pretty good spot, because you get enough saturation where the color will be visible and noticeable, but not to the point that you're gonna feel like the room's gonna be too dark, depending on the situation, of course. This is a color that pairs really nicely with lighter creams off whites, or even crisp stark whites as well. If you have some more natural materials in your home and your decor, all gonna go together really, really nicely. Although you don't wanna go too beige heavy, otherwise it'll just be beige on beige on beige, which is a look, but maybe not for everyone. Now, technically, this is a color that's part of the orange family when it comes to Sherwin-Williams' classification. I find that the warmth maybe comes a little more from gold, or more specifically ochre, like a bronze sort of feel, a bronze undertone. It is dusty in its quality. It does have that bit of gray mixed in to tone it down slightly. So it's not overly heavy with beige. It's not going to feel buttery and creamy like a more pure color would. It has that mix of brown and gray mixed in to really just soften it slightly. I think it's a fantastic color to use in a home, especially on the walls. The only thing that I would say is I don't necessarily see it as much as a main color that you'd want to envelop a space with. Maybe 15, 20 years ago when builder's beige was everywhere. This color is nice, but I don't think of it as something that needs to go everywhere. I see it more of a secondary color where you select specific rooms to use it in because you are being purposeful with it rather than just defaulting to it. I do have a default color actually coming up in the color pairing, so just stay tuned for that. On the outside of your home, I think Kilim Beige is just as versatile as it is inside. It has enough coloration where the sun isn't going to completely make it feel white or off-white, which can sometimes happen. It has a nice sense of balance too, so it's not going to skew towards any weird tones that maybe you're not expecting. But if you are worried about that, whether you are using it inside or out, just test it out first, okay? Please. Now, if you're really into Kilim Beige, you're really considering it for your home, but you just heard me say that you can't put it everywhere. I mean, you can if you want, but I wouldn't recommend it. What are some other colors that you can incorporate with it to make it work? That's where I got you. I got us, okay? Color pairing number 1 is White Sesame by Sherwin-Williams. This is going to be the main color of this palette. So this is the one that you would use in the main areas of your home to become the true neutral of the palette, which means Kilim Beige in this whole color scheme is going to be a secondary color. So it's still neutral. Both of these colors are warmer leaning neutrals, although I would say White Sesame is even more neutral because it has more of a tinted look where it seems like there's more white in it, so it's a brighter color. It has a 71 LRV, which is decently bright. It's going to feel much paler in person, which is normally going to be a good thing in those nice open areas in your place, because it'll help feel even more open with all that light that's going to be reflecting back into the space. While Kilim Beige is definitely more beige dominant, White Sesame is kind of like a light grayish. It has less colorant in the paint itself, which means you won't see as much of that kind of golden, ochre, bronzy quality at all. It almost seems like a creamy gray in a weird way. And I think that just gives it a little more versatility if you're not leaning too heavily into all the warmth, like the warm neutrals. Maybe you want a few cooler colors, which we definitely have coming up next. This color pairing is the second one, but it looks like an accent to me. It's called Trade Wind. And I absolutely love this color as kind of like a light, subtle accent choice. Its LRV is 61, so 10 points darker than White Sesame. And with that added darkness comes added color hue. The hue of blue is present, and it has this sort of sky blue feel. It doesn't feel overly blue dominant. It's an interesting choice because it does sort of feel kind of baby blue to me, but it also has the slightest bit of green mixed in, which I think is interesting. It helps it feel a little more aquatic, nautical. It doesn't have a purple shift, which some blues can have. So I do like that, especially when we're pairing it with warmer beiges to begin with. They're not going to compete too much because green is technically a warmed up version of blue when you think about it, with the yellow added in. And you can even see in the picture that Sherwin-Williams uses how it looks so perfect next to a warmer off-white, kind of like White Sesame is. I mean, you can even argue that that piece of natural wood over the fireplace, that's kind of like Kilim Beige. So right there, you can start to see the color palette taking shape. And then comes color pairing number 3. And you will now know why I wanted a little bit of green in Trade Wind, because we have agate green, named after the beautiful gemstone. This color does feel pretty fresh and lively, but it has a 34 LRV, which is the darkest color on this list, technically. And that would kind of put it in accent territory. Not because it's the darkest color ever, it's far from that, but that saturation of beautiful kind of pistachio green cutting through everything else just works wonderfully. And I also love how it works with Trade Wind because they are sort of adjacent to one another on the color wheel. You can even see behind me, I have the green wall and the blue light. They're not necessarily siblings, but they're cousins. So they got along at the cookout. So what's interesting in this palette is you can use Trade Wind and agate green in the same space if you wanted for that adjacent look, or you can just pick and choose one or the other depending on the vibe and the feel of the room. Have fun with these two because I do feel they are very interchangeable. Even though green seems to be a more natural fit with those warm neutrals because of the whole earthy organic vibe of like beige, brown, and green, Trade Wind does have that airy sort of open sky feel to it, which I think it has going for it. So mix and match them to your heart's content. I think you can have a lot of fun here. But before we do anything else, let's talk about my 2 trim color options. This is going to be for your baseboards, your doors and your frames, your casings, your crown molding. If you're going for a lighter color, I would recommend Greek Villa, which is a Sherwin-Williams color that is like a sunny white, very bright, but still maintains just a subtle warmth to it. It's not going to feel as powerful as a high reflective white or anything like that. So it will look clean without being visually cloying. Like it's not going to give you a headache based on how bright it is. Just a nice compromise there. And if you wanted a darker trim color in this palette, especially for Kilim Beige, our color of the video, Foothills is an interesting choice to me. It's described as being a warm stone neutral. And I do feel that. It has this combination of slate gray mixed with brown. So very much within the wheelhouse of warm neutrals. And then it's also going to be different enough to really pop off those other colors we talked about. Your blue and your green. So fun.
Such fun!
I mean, look at this palette. How much fun is this? Is it too much? Let me know down below. And we have another video right over here if you want some more Paint People fun. The Paint People. That's us.